This is Phoenix Talkback, the world's first Jewish and Chicano radio show! Welcome back to Phoenix Talkback. And in the studio with me today, I have as co-host Victor Hoelscher. Hello, Victor.
Hello, Lou. Good morning, everyone.
I also have in the studio the Working Dems Club, Gail, the Bohemian organizer.
Good morning, Lou. Good morning, Victor.
Good morning, Gail.
I also have Angel Garcia.
Good morning, everybody.
Hello, everybody. All right. And today is the third in a series of Where's My Recall? So we'll be getting into that in the program. Hey, everybody, did you hear what Jeb Bush said about immigrants? Here it is.
Immigrants create far more businesses than native-born Americans over the last 20 years. Immigrants are more fertile, and they love families, and they bring a younger population. Immigrants create an engine of economic prosperity. And so what should we do?
So, immigrants are fertile. They're baby makers to Jeb Bush. What do you guys think of that?
Even when the Republicans are trying to be nice, that Neanderthal mentality still bleeds through.
Yeah, no kidding. It's sort of like a backhanded compliment or something. But, I'm reminded of the Superman, Man of Steel, and people are posting about it, and they see Superman as an immigrant. And they're attaching themselves to Superman. Here's some of the things I've heard about Superman posted on Facebook is that nobody has ever really asked him for his papers. Superman should pay back all taxes and undergo fingerprinting and background checks. He's super immigrant. Superman is America's illegal alien darling. He's literally an illegal alien, that's Superman. ICE never went to the Daily Planet to find Perry White for hiring an undocumented alien. Superman landed on Earth by way of a UFO, yet he represents the American dream. One tends to not anger the guy who is bulletproof and who can fire lasers from his eyes. Superman really is only considered an immigrant if he comes to Arizona. But my take on this is I believe that Superman is Jewish. Yes, did you guys know that Superman is a Jewish immigrant? Did you know that? Here are some reasons why. Superman's creator, Jerry Siegel, was Jewish, and Siegel was strongly influenced by the anti-Semitism he saw and felt when he was growing up, and that the model for Superman was Samson. I don't know if you guys knew that. Siegel was dropping hints, such as his name is Kal-El, as in Israel, or Prophet Samuel El, or Daniel. The alien super baby was like Moses, rescued by non-Jews and raised in foreign cultures. Clark Kent was Superman trying to assimilate and find his place in this new world called Earth. Superman's lingering heart sickness at leaving Krypton and living as an immigrant on Earth is classic survivor's guilt. The Nazis recognized Superman's Jewish origins in articles published in the newspaper of the SS in 1940. Superman was the ultimate foreigner escaping to America from Krypton and shedding his Jewish name for Clark Kent. This split personality was the only way Superman could survive, yet it gave him perpetual angst. And you can't get any more Jewish than that. I'd like to let you know. It's very true. And the last rule of thumb is that when a name ends in man, the person is usually Jewish or superhero, or in this case, both. And that's very true. Oops, that's very true. And so I think that Superman is Jewish immigrants. There we go. Well, there's more news happening here in Arizona. This last week on Friday, Judge Snow, who issued the ruling against Joe Arpaio for racial profiling, he has recommended a monitor, and the final resolution ought to come by August. And here's the report.
He is the self-proclaimed toughest sheriff in America who's been doing things his way for years.
But a federal judge is about to change the way Sheriff Joe Arpaio does business. A recent court ruling found the sheriff's office guilty of racial profiling. Well, what happens next, Jason?
Well, there was a brief hearing in federal court today, which you could say was the first step in resolving the issue of racial profiling within the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office. The one thing that stood out was that a monitor will likely be appointed to watch what Arpaio and his deputies are doing.
Just last month, a judge determined that Arpaio's office had engaged in racial profiling as part of MCSO's illegal immigration sweeps. The sheriff's office was immediately prohibited from detaining Hispanics as a way to investigate their immigration status. Today's hearing in federal court was the first step towards setting up new policies and procedures within the sheriff's office. The judge said he will likely require a monitor to oversee MCSO and make sure its discrimination practices come to an end. But he did tell us he will comply with any court order and continue enforcing the law.
I will continue to enforce the employer sanction law, which is a state class 4 felony, and the human smuggling laws. I just said that. I will continue to enforce the state criminal violation.
Arpaio would not talk how he would feel having someone look over his shoulder in his own office. His attorneys have consistently argued in court that they are against having a monitor oversee MCSO. The judge told attorneys on both sides that he wants them to come up with some kind of resolution on this racial profiling issue by mid-August. So that's really the timeline we're dealing with. All indications are it will include someone overseeing Arpaio's operation.
Why do you put up with that clown?
Well, Joe Arpaio is now trying to play nice. He's abandoned his immigrant enforcement policy. He can no longer contact ICE. And so now he's going into the desert to rescue the immigrants who are trying to cross. I mean, how long do you guys think this is going to last?
5 minutes? 10 minutes?
5 minutes? He doesn't want to monitor.
Well, he doesn't want to monitor. I think we all know his ego is such that he's not going to want to allow that. I don't know that he's going to have a choice, but I think one thing that kind of gets missed a little bit in what Arpaio says is he will continue to enforce the employer's sanctions. And from what I understand, that's a very hard thing to prove because we have E-Verify. And then when we do prove it, they get a little crack on the hand and, a fine, and it's all over. So the real answer to Arpaio is changes in legislation.
Yes, it is. But I don't see him as ever having enforced employer sanctions. Have any of you? He's never bragged about how many employers he's busted.
He goes after the immigrants. He don't go after the employers. Never once that I'm aware of.
I don't think he has either, but I've also heard him say that it's a really hard thing to prove. And I think he's such a hardcore lawman that if he could, he would. Those identity theft raids he does, he'll tell you, too, that it doesn't happen overnight. You have to have months and months of surveillance and information before you can just go, knock on the door and arrest people. So, I don't know. Where does he take it from here?
Well, he's taken the lead of people calling in to tip him off, to say, at this business are some undocumented, they don't use the word undocumented, you know what they say, here are some undocumented people, but it backfired on him because it turned out it was sort of manipulated and planted. And one guy who refused to buckle under Bill Montgomery's attempt to prosecute for a felony for identity theft. It got thrown out on a technicality simply because Joe Arpaio's not really doing his job that well. We covered it in this program a few weeks ago. He's got to cross all T's and dot all I's, and he's not doing that. And he's very, very sloppy. And this mea culpa of abandoning immigrant enforcement is really, I think, just a dog and pony show. I'm glad all of you agree. So let's, I'll tell you what, let's take a quick break, and we'll return to Phoenix Talkback right after this. A&B Automotive is your local auto care center, trusted with your vehicle since 1995. They are your local service center for light trucks, domestic, and foreign vehicles. Their experience ensures that your vehicle is well maintained all year round. It's the small repairs that prevent costly breakdowns, and you can trust A&B Automotive ASE certified expertise in everything from oil changes, tune-ups and brakes, to drivetrain and engine repairs. It's what they do to make your vehicle reliable when you need it most. Go see A&B Automotive at 1235 East Dunlap in Phoenix, Arizona, or call them at 602-906-9579. Se habla español. They're also on the web at abautomotiveaz.com. That's A&B Automotive, 1235 East Dunlap in Phoenix. 602-906-9579. Do you have a business or a message you would like to promote? Phoenix Talkback would like to help you. Phoenix Talkback is now available to you to help you tell the world whatever they need to know. When you advertise on Phoenix Talkback, not only will your message be heard on the radio, it will also be heard on the internet for as long as there is an internet, and we think that will be for a very long time. Our creative sound engineers will craft a custom-made, memorable image people will hear about your product or your message. Try us. Try Phoenix Talkback for your advertising needs. Right now, we're new and we're pretty inexpensive. So this is a golden opportunity for you to reach out to the growing number of listeners who are tuning into Phoenix Talkback. Call us at 602-910-4568. That's 602-910-4568 to get with our program and reach all the listeners. They're waiting for you. We're back on Phoenix Talkback. I'm here with Victor Hoelscher, my co-host, Gail, the Bohemian organizer, and Angel Garcia of the Working Dems Club. And we'll be getting into part 3 of Where's My Recall before too long. And did you guys hear that Bill Montgomery has put a gag order on Mary Rose Wilcox from commenting about the ruling against Joe Arpaio? Have you guys heard about that?
I have, and there seems to be a lot of outrage on social media that Mary Rose should have the right to address this situation. So I don't agree with that, but that's what I'm reading.
Disagree totally. As much as it pains me to agree with something Bill Montgomery does, I have to laud him here. She has a personal interest in this. She has a judgment against Arpaio. She has a personal interest in this decision not being appealed.
So in other words, there's a million reasons why she shouldn't.
There's a million reasons why she shouldn't. And you know, I can bring up topics from last year where I tried to draw her attention to some things about Bill Montgomery, and she wasn't all that interested in moving on them. But now maybe she's interested in doing something with Montgomery, since it hit a little closer to home with her.
All right, let's remind everybody that Mary Rose Wilcox is a member of the Board of Supervisors who's about to decide whether the appeal Joe Arpaio wants to conduct against Judge Snow's ruling, Arpaio wants it financed by the county. And now protesters are appealing to the county to decide not to finance that appeal. And I bet Mary Rose Wilcox would say no. And that's pretty much a given. But Bill Montgomery has put a gag order on her. I'd like you to listen to this. This is what was reported when Mary Rose Wilcox won her settlement in the county. Her own board awarded her $1 million.
I spoke with Mary Rose Wilcox. She tells me that she believes she was targeted by Thomas and Arpaio simply because of her views on immigration, not because she did anything wrong. She went to the courts claiming abuse of power and false prosecutions, and today a judge signed off on it. That's after a mediator determined it would cost the county less to settle than to go to court. Anyway, Mary Rose Wilcox is now Maricopa County's newest millionaire. She walks away with $975,000 plus legal fees.
She's getting a $1 million settlement.
She's getting a $1 million settlement. And she's getting a $1 million settlement for being harassed by Arpaio and for her views on immigration, not for her views against racial profiling. So I think the people who are supporting Mary Rose Wilcox are forgetting why she was given this settlement to begin with.
How much of that $1 million actually went back to recall Arpaio? I'm just curious. I mean, if she got the money because of this guy, supposedly, how much was she willing to give back to get rid of this guy?
Ooh, I would like to find that out. You think we'll ever find out what kind of money the Respect Arizona recall of Joe Arpaio will ever publish and inform us?
We'll know about half of it, since Citizens For Arizona kept asking for donations through that whole Arpaio recall, even though Respect Arizona was the bona fide recall committee.
In other words, and I've said this before, does everybody understand, everybody out there in radio listening land, that the people who attempted to recall Joe Arpaio, they were soliciting money into two different places? One was Respect Arizona, and the other was CBA. And right up until the end of the recall, a number of people think that even as early as a month previous to the end of the recall, that they knew that they were not going to get their numbers. So does everybody know that there was two different paths for money? You think maybe, I bet if she got the money, she would have donated probably to CBA, so it wouldn't show up on the recall.
Maybe, maybe not. As a progressive Democrat, though, I think part of the message has to be, we have to keep our eye on the ball. Every time something happens around here that the Democrats jump on and fuel in some direction or other, like HB 2305. They want to spin it as something that it isn't. And as a progressive Democrat, I want to keep my eye on the issues. And the issue is Mary Rose Wilcox has a conflict of interest. And like Victor alluded to a minute ago, although Bill Montgomery isn't my favorite either, you have to give credit where credit is due. You have to recognize facts as facts, and you can't spin everything into something that it isn't.
Everyone agree to that? Everyone agree that
I agree.
It's just a lot of spin, and Bill Montgomery is using a law that details conflict of interest.
She never denied that there was nothing there to be found, though, and I always thought that was rather interesting. And I think had Andrew Thomas not gotten greedy and gone after more than one person at a time, I really think he would have found some interesting stuff on Miss Wilcox. That's my personal opinion based on what I've heard in inner Democratic circles about how she conducts business.
And does it really matter if Mary Rose Wilcox gets to weigh in on this or not? She's the lone Democrat on the Board of Supervisors. The other four will vote for the appeal, and quite frankly, I think we should let the justice system work like it's supposed to and not try to deny due process.
But did you see her? She was on the news on Friday after Judge Snow decided to delay until August and recommend a monitor for the MCSO. She was on the news. She was captured making a statement about Judge Snow's ruling. Yeah. So I think she's broken that gag order against her. You didn't see it?
No, I missed that.
Yeah.
I caught the tail end of it.
Good. I'm glad someone did besides myself. Otherwise, some people might think I'm talking out through the top of my hat.
But, my honest opinion is on Mary Rose Wilcox, as a seasoned member of the Board of Supervisors, she should have taken the high road and just declined. She knows she's got a conflict of interest. Why did she have to just keep going on and on and on until somebody put a gag order on her? I mean, she should have just took the high road and said, I'm backing out of this. I've got a conflict of interest. Everybody knows it, and just been quiet on her own. Why does everything have to be forced on some people?
Lawyers in this town make a lot of money.
Yeah, that's true.
That's what came out a week ago or so when Mike Stauffer was on. Is he mentioned that Mike Manning has made a lot of money in this whole Arpaio. There's a lot of money to be made whenever there's a scrimmage line, whenever there's fear, and whenever there's contention. And Gail, you mentioned HB 2305, that is known as the voter suppression bill that's now on its way to Governor Brewer's desk, which puts controls over anyone who's trying to conduct a recall, or no longer can a citizens organization like CBA collect ballots.
Yes, I mentioned that.
Yeah, you know what? I'm in favor of 2305 in that regard. Some people might say, oh, it's voter suppression.
You are a bad Democrat.
I'm a bad Democrat, huh? No, I'd like to remind everybody what was going on October 19th as Randy Parraz showed that he had 700 ballots.
We're here to deliver this thing. This is not the first time we've done this. We've done this during the recall of Russell Pierce. We've done this during the primary. We would defeat him again. We've been here many times delivering ballots on the floor. So we collect ballots that we are committed to turning in. You're going to see today us turn over 600 ballots that people have given us the last 4 days to come up here.
It's about 1,000 ballots a week, and then they clog up the elections department with all these ballots, and that's what the law is trying to prevent.
Interesting choice of words, that we are committed to turn in. So it makes me wonder if these organizations selectively choose whose ballots they want to turn into the Secretary of State or the county recorder's office.
Actually, they are. They ask someone with a ballot, who do you plan to vote for? And if it's a candidate who is in opposition to what CBA wants to support, they say, thank you, have a nice day, and leave it up to the voter to get the ballot into the elections department.
Either collect them all or don't collect any of them at all. It shouldn't be selectively, I'm going to get this small group of people's ballots because they voted the way I want. That's not helping democracy, that's hurting it.
That's not voter education. That is voter micromanagement.
I agree. And we'll get back into this for part 3 of Where's the Recall right after this break.
Radio? Why should I advertise on radio? There's nothing to look at, no pictures.
Listen, you can do things on radio you couldn't possibly do on TV.
That'll be the day.
All right, watch this. Okay, people, and now when I give you the cue, I want the 700-foot mountain of whipped cream to roll into Lake Michigan, which has been drained and filled with hot chocolate. Then the Royal Canadian Air Force will fly overhead towing a 10-ton maraschino cherry, which will be dropped into the whipped cream to the cheering of 25,000 extras. All right, cue the mountain. Cue the Air Force. Cue the maraschino cherry. Okay, 25,000 cheering extras. Now, you want to try that on television?
Well...
You see, radio is a very special medium because it stretches the imagination.
Doesn't television stretch the imagination?
Up to 27 inches, yes.
Is this your car? Or is this your car? The ASE certified mechanics at A&B Automotive have the expertise to make your car sound like this. You can rely on A&B Automotive to keep you safe on the road. Go see them at 1235 East Dunlap in Phoenix, Arizona, or call them at 602-906-9579. Se habla español. They're also on the web at abautomotiveaz.com. A&B Automotive, 1235 East Dunlap in Phoenix, 602-906-9579. Because you don't want your car to sound like this. You want it to sound like this. A&B Automotive, 602-906-9579. Tell them Phoenix Talkback sent you. Do you have a business or a message you would like to promote? Phoenix Talkback would like to help you. Phoenix Talkback is now available to you to help you tell the world whatever they need to know. When you advertise on Phoenix Talkback, not only will your message be heard on the radio, it will also be heard on the internet for as long as there is an internet, and we think that will be for a very long time. Our creative sound engineers will craft a custom-made, memorable image people will hear about your product or your message. Try us! Try Phoenix Talkback for your advertising needs. Right now, we're new and we're pretty inexpensive. So this is a golden opportunity for you to reach out to the growing number of listeners who are tuning into Phoenix Talkback. Call us at 602-910-4568. That's 602-910-4568 to get with our program and reach all the listeners. They're waiting for you.
Okay, welcome back to Phoenix Talkback. And this is the third in our series asking the question, where's the recall? To bring everybody up to speed, I would like to play for you a compilation of a number of statements that we've all made on this program regarding the recall. Why isn't Joe Arpaio recalled yet?
What is going on in our community that we can be taken on this ride, this prolonged, extended fantasy?
Randy Parraz, president of the Citizens for a Better Arizona, blamed the failed recall on the lack of donors, the lack of volunteers, the lack of buy-in by other elected officials, and the lack of courage to stand up to Sheriff Arpaio.
He's right. There wasn't buy-in. There wasn't help. So I'm not concerned about the officials, the elected officials, Sheriff Joe himself. I'm concerned about all the people who aren't moved at the fact that they're loading up Mexicans by the busload, stopping them at street lights, putting them into prisons, and turning them into some kind of persecuted second-class citizenry. Randy's a professional. The people who ran this recall, they're all professionals. They know just as well as I do that there is no chance of recalling Sheriff Joe, and yet they took us through this again. According to the statements made on that day, it's not gonna stop. Didn't Lilia say that it doesn't stop here? We will continue. Continue what is the question?
Right.
Continue what? What have we accomplished so far?
I didn't know it was going to be more than recall Pierce. I didn't know it was going to morph into supporting a candidate for sheriff, but once he was done recalling Pierce, then he had another effort underway.
Maricopa County, Arizona has recall fever. I mean, when does it stop?
Stop, children, watch that sound. Everybody look what's going down.
Blaming money for the loss of the recall is like blaming the Powerball machine for not kicking out your number. The win wasn't there. They knew it.
Lilia Alvarez announced that all of the petitions had been shredded, destroyed. And when asked how many signatures there were, her answer was, it's irrelevant.
I think they could have been working on a CIR. They could have been putting this energy towards the DREAM Act all this time. The DREAM Act would have essentially neutralized Sheriff Joe and his behavior. He claims that he's just doing what is the law. And if you change the law, then he will presumably adhere, right? But yet we just go after Sheriff Joe personally to no avail, and it's a waste of our time.
In 2011, Randy took 30% for himself. I bet you if that were any other nonprofit here in the state, people would be up in arms for someone taking 30% of the total cash contribution. People love going after the symptoms and not the cause of the illness. And they use that to filter all this money into their coffers. So they come up with creative titles like pollster and consultant, and they write themselves bigger checks than we're used to seeing for someone who traditionally does that job.
The question here is, where is my recall?
Yeah, where's the recall?
Where's the recall?
Yeah,
Didn't we get promised a recall twice? Where's the recall? Instead, what I got is a re-election, and I still have a Sheriff Joe.
The answer has always been comprehensive immigration reform.
Randy Parraz has said the issue of immigration is not a litmus test for anybody to join CBA, and I think that's where he's making his tactical error.
The way to take the wind out of Arpaio's sails is to pass comprehensive immigration reform.
I think the community, people who gave and donated money time and time again, ought to know how many signatures there were, what percentage were valid, how close were they? For all we know, all they collected was $150,000, and a few people may have signed their names as Mickey Mouse. We will never know, and that is disingenuous. More importantly, he continued to ask for donations to the very last day. If he knew he was not going to succeed.
I'd like to know how much money has been received collectively by CBA and Respect Arizona since the inception of the recall.
Does Randy need Joe Arpaio to keep the money flowing? Is Joe Arpaio necessary in order for Randy to continue to ask for money?
Randy Parraz really has no interest in getting rid of Joe Arpaio. That's not his thing. He's interested in power and money. That's what he's interested in.
He took 30% off of the top for a political consultant, and that doesn't include his personal expense account. And during the Pierce recall, we got expense accounts here for travel money to Washington. Why do you have to go to D.C. to recall Russell Pierce? And at this point, I don't have any proof in front of me that there was ever a legitimate recall effort put on here by anybody other than a bunch of hard-working, well-intentioned volunteers that, in my opinion, was exploited. And I'm angry as heck about it. I'm just going to keep speaking out against these ridiculous fake foul activists that we have out here that's using the community and impersonating activists and community organizers to make a living. I'm going to keep talking against that.
You want to know, where's our recall?
I call it a so-called recall, because at that point, that's all it is. A so-called recall.
So-called recall.
A so-called recall.
So-called recall.
We better stop. Hey, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going. We better stop. Hey, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going. We better stop now. What's that sound? Everybody look what's going. We better stop.
So-called recall.
So-called.
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 So-called recall. So-called recall. But there's a lot more to it than that, folks. You know, there's only so much time in a day, only so much time in a lifetime. The amount of money that we have is finite, and we've got to be very careful on how we spend our resources. And to that end, what happened is that Gail and Angel here did a little digging and published not only the actual submitted tax return of CBA, but also took the same information and tried to replicate that tax return of how it really should be. And the differences are striking. A media packet was released this last week to the media. I'm in the media here. I got one of them. I've got the authors of this endeavor here in front of us. Here is Gail and Angel. And you guys, I took a look at these two different tax returns, and the differences are striking in terms of thousands and thousands of dollars. So tell me about this information in the media packet, and what is it trying to prove?
Essentially, I was on board with Randy and CBA, and I contributed time and money and bought into the hype until a year later, when they immediately jumped on the bandwagon of Paul Penzone before we knew who he was, what he stood for, anything. And I came onto the Facebook page for, I think it was Pierce Watch or something. And I started having a discussion with them, Amy McMullen and Robert Hosch to be exact. And I asked them, why are you just dropping support for Stauffer, who's highly qualified to jump on this Penzone wagon? When did you become a PAC? We've always been a PAC. We supported Jerry Lewis. We this, we that. And then all of a sudden, Randy Parraz came on that thread and said, we are not a PAC. And then the other two began to backpedal and say, well, I guess I don't know the difference between a 501c3 and a 501c4. And at that point, I was just mortified. So then Angel started in the months that followed. Angel would say things to me because he's like an encyclopedia of political facts. And he was telling me about Form 990s and how it was public information and how nonprofits had to file these kinds of things. And that's what started the whole investigation. I simply pulled the Arizona Campaign Finance Report for the Russell Pierce recall because it was the only time Randy ever filed campaign finance report. And I broke it down into how much was spent for consultants, how much was spent for polling, utilities, rent, everything. And I took that information to an accountant and did a tax return. So that's kind of how we arrived at what we did. We compared the tax return Parraz submitted, and I always wonder about that because why didn't he have the bookkeeper do that? And then I also wondered, did he get a 1099? So we just began to compare all this information and found, I don't know, what would you call it? Questionable numbers.
Yeah, actual income is not even submitted on the tax return.
Parraz was the single biggest expense at that time and during that recall. And he got a little over $26,000 in compensation. But what he reported to Internal Revenue was $11,000. And so that to me was like, holy smokes, what in the world is this? That's when we decided to get the other tax return and see if those numbers jive, and they don't.
Okay, it's clear that CBA has been operating outside of their designated definition of a social welfare organization by being political. And they have, despite what anybody might want to say. But it says here, Angel, I guess you did the research to determine that the IRS considers a reasonable amount of standard fees for nonprofits to individuals as consultants by up to 10 to 15%.
Well, there's this thing called inured excess benefit that Randy Parraz took a benefit of this entity. So in other words, he sits on the board, he tells this corporation, this entity, what to do, and then he pays himself as an employee also, calling himself a consultant. So he can't pay himself as a board member, so he pays himself as a consultant. So he figured out a way to do something that a lot of people give their time, energy, and effort for free across the board in the nonprofit world and to get paid for it. And I looked at a whole bunch of different nonprofits, and I was curious kind of what they pay people out of percentage of income, and it's between 10 and 15%. I didn't see anything higher than 15. So he's more than double the industry standard.
And some people think that some other expenses, in-kind contributions for which Randy Parraz benefited by or profited by, that gives his take at closer to 50%.
Well, and here's the other problem, too. In-kind contributions are really hard to determine a fair market value for. So the numbers we have are based off of what he reported to the Secretary of State that those in-kind contributions are worth. Paul Castaneda, his right-hand man, his treasurer, is involved with CWA, and CWA did quite a large amount of in-kind contributions, and that's what they said they valued this office space at, or they valued these copies at. But people said they didn't report every time he went in there, and they ran off copies from what we call the VAN, or the Voter Access Network, that has every registered voter in the state. So there's a lot of things that may not have been reported on these in-kind contributions.
This last week, someone wrote, I don't care if he gets 100% of the money, or I don't care what his cut is as long as he successfully recalled Joe Arpaio. But there are limits, aren't there?
Well, then you operate as a for-profit organization to get rid of somebody. You don't operate as a nonprofit. When you operate as a nonprofit, you're telling the community, I'm vested in your interests, and I'm here to protect you and what you need. And you can go out on a limb and say, well, he's justifying social welfare by getting rid of people that he disagrees with politically and ideologically, and that makes the world a better place. But again, that's going out on a major limb. If your mission statement says, I want better schools, and you say, oh, well, I'm going to make better schools by getting rid of Russell Pierce, that's kind of a stretch. That doesn't necessarily mean you created better schools. That just means you got rid of Russell Pierce.
Well, here's another stretch. For the 2011 tax return, Parraz reported approximately $78,000 in contributions, but the forensic return that was replicated came up with approximately $137,000. I mean, that's not a mere difference. That's a big difference. Why is it that he reported only $78,000 when in actuality an unbiased, outside objective CPA person came up with $137,000?
I think it's obvious that he didn't realize he needs to report the in-kind contributions, even though they are a wash. But they are income and they are an expenditure. So you have to report that nonetheless. But even if you take that into consideration, the numbers for expenses and compensation and everything else that's on there, on that Parraz filled out tax return, is just different. It just doesn't jibe with the numbers that were turned into the Arizona Secretary of State's office.
But these differences are so gross. They're so obvious. The difference between what he reported and what a forensic tax return person was able to determine from, what was that, the campaign finance reports?
Mm-hmm. Well, they're different numbers, all right, and it can only be one of two options. Either Randy should have let the bookkeeper do the tax return because he's inept, or there's something unethical about those numbers. It's the only two situations that can exist.
Angel?
I think the bigger message I want people to get is if there's a nonprofit you have questions about, there's a lot of information that they do have to disclose publicly. If they have people that they pay, they have to tell you who their top 5 highest paid individuals are. They have to disclose that to you. They fill out that Form 990 that gives you not an exact, but it gives you a basic picture of income versus expenses, and that's a very important report to have. I think the bigger picture, what we really wanted people to get out of this is that there's a lot of problems with the way nonprofits operate here in the United States, and there's a lot of things that need to be corrected. And you have people that preach about transparency, and it sounds wonderful. They get up on their soapbox, they're dressed to the nines, they got their hair slicked up and greased, and they're ready to go, and they preach about, we're going to be open, and we're going to tell you where everything's going, and then you start requesting, well, if I give $1, why is 30 cents on the dollar going to you? And you start asking these kinds of questions, and then they outcast you. That shouldn't be happening. It should be, you're soliciting me for money, and right off the bat, you tell me, well, just so you understand where your money is going, 30 cents is going to go here, 20 cents is going to go there, it's going to go for this program, it's going to go for that expenditure. I watch these infomercials that are on at midnight, 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning for these different Christian networks that feed people overseas. And that's what they open up with. 75 cents of every dollar or 80 cents of every dollar goes to feed a child in Africa. If they can disclose that right off the bat, why can't these other nonprofits do that?
Well, and quite frankly, I don't think a Form 990 is enough public information, because the way that we discovered what Parraz and CBA were doing is because I could compare the Arizona finance report with the 990, and they're different sets of figures. So if I only had the 990 to look at, I wouldn't know half of what I know right now.
Okay, so either CBA, Randy Parraz, is inept, or he knows what he was doing. So, as I've said on this program before, a guideline I try to live by, I do try to live by this, is don't do anything I cannot defend. I cannot see how Randy Parraz or CBA or all the people who defend him can defend this.
There are going to be two camps. The camp that thinks the end justifies the means, and there will be the camp that thinks ethics matter. That's the camp I belong to.
That's the camp I belong to also, is that ethics matter. Accountability is important. Oversight is important. Transparency is important. As a matter of fact, these are necessary prerequisites to being, I think, a good American citizen, let alone a member of the Democratic Party.
Well, ethics matter to me. I keep remembering Parraz running for Senate, and I don't know that I want him to be a senator.
Chances are he might get caught doing something else. And all the hard work to put him in office, if that's what he wants, would have to be sort of undone or spun around.
Well, and I want to remind everybody, I want Team Awesome to know, I want Adios Arpaio to know that they can organize on their own. Whatever funds are taken in don't have to be wasted on Parraz. They have the power to do what they have to do. And that's just the way we're going to get things done,
The other thing I found interesting, CBA, Citizens for a Better Arizona, has been claiming they're a 501c4, so they can lobby legislators. They can be engaged in political activities. That's not illegal for them to do. But what made me wonder, well, did you file a 1024 with the IRS to tell that you have an intention to be a C4, that you intend to collect these monies as a C4? Contacted the IRS, and they said, we have no record of them filing a 1024. So that's one thing you might want to ask. What type of nonprofit status do you have? So 501c3, you give money and it's tax deductible, but make sure you ask, is this a legitimate 501c3? So there's a couple different websites I like to use to check them out and find out more about them. A really great one is called GuideStar. They have access to the 990s. Also the Foundation Center, based out of San Francisco. I've worked with them a lot. There's GiveWell. Charity Navigator is a really awesome one because it goes in and it rates on a whole bunch of things, including transparency. So that's kind of interesting. And then also the Better Business Bureau, there's a local one here in Arizona that has the Wise Giving Guide, and they have a website where you can see if they're legitimate or not.
Well, and just quickly to back up what Angel says, the first question you should ask is, do they publish their finance reports? Because if they don't, that's a big red flag, and then you really have to start digging deep.
Yeah, and to mirror on what you said a few moments ago, I don't understand why people are just so enamored with supporting Randy Parraz and CBA no matter what. And a part of this series has basically been to illustrate that the community has been taken for a ride. I wonder what else Randy Parraz will stir everybody up for.
Well, even if it weren't Randy, it's just the way that nonprofits in general are allowed to operate, not just here in the state, but on a federal level. There's so many things they don't have to disclose to people that are causing all these issues. And if there was more mandates and more public policy that required them to release more information, we could actually be informed consumers, and I would think that would be a good thing. But there's so many laws that protect these so-called nonprofits that allow them to not have to disclose all this information, and that harms the consumers in the so-called free market.
I want to thank you, Angel. I want to thank you, Gail. I want to thank you, Victor.
Yes, sir.
And I want to thank everybody out there in Radioland for listening to Phoenix Talkback today. Keep listening. We'll never steer you wrong. And ethics matter here at Phoenix Talkback. Thank you.